through and you tested out different things to find out where you want it to be. I was recently watching a Twitter. Now I'm just playing. I was watching a TikTok. For those of you that caught that, you caught that. I was watching a TikTok and a young lady was talking about the pivot and how she's done all of these things. And a lot of, I think young people think we walk straight in like, yes, and I'm gonna stick with this for 40 years. And oftentimes we've deviated and weaved in and out of different things, maybe within the same employer, but it looks like we've never ever changed anything. So I absolutely believe testing out different things. Even in construction, I had 3 to 5 different roles. So named and unnamed. So it's really important to definitely go through and test different things out, know what you don't like through co-ops and internships, part-time jobs to really figure out where you want to be. So I liked how you said it was boots on the ground and you found out you really like being boots on the ground. I did not like boots on the ground when I did an internship. And that's why I moved away from construction. So now you figured out what you wanted to do. You like water. What's the next thing you do in your career?
Yeah. So, well, I one of the things that I experienced, and in our research at Water Citizen, have found a lot of other women, particularly in women of color, are experiencing is spending many years going to school at night while working. Right? You figure out what you want to do, and then you start working towards the degrees. And so, going to school while working or working while going to school. I mean, for me, it was about 12 years altogether. And really, having to support myself, having to put aside other possible family developments, and, to be able to get myself into a position so that I could really have a contribution in my field. And, and there was always that next thing, right? I finally got to the point where I finished, was finishing up my PhD. I was told, go ahead and go out and, start working. And, there was sort of some squabbling between my advisor and co-advisor. And I said, just go start working. And so I was actually recruited by a firm that wasn't doing quite as much in the water space. They had a lot of water engineers, hydrogeologists, and they wanted to have more in the water sector. They were doing a lot in oil and gas and mining and things like that. But yeah, they asked me to come in and really develop their water sector. I had my own consulting practice throughout my PhD, had lots of contacts and knowledge of the industry, and I was so focused on getting things up and running and wrapping things up in my dissertation, and I didn't really notice right away. Basically, I was a diversity hire. In fact, I was told right after I started there that the reason the guy who recruited me had brought me in at that level was to prove that a woman could become an associate in the engineering division globally. I would have been the first. Every time he tried to develop a woman to become an associate, she followed her husband or got breast cancer. So at the time, I was like, yes, bring it on. I can do this, and over time, I came to realize why it was that women were not becoming associates at that firm.
So have you found that the reason women were not becoming associates at firm something that you've seen across the water industry?
Yeah, there's been a lot of emphasis, certainly in the last, as people have been looking at the silver tsunami, all these retiring baby boomers, on trying to attract younger generations in, and more women, more people of color. But as long as you're in those lower level positions, somebody's got to do the scout work. Somebody's got to do the field work. Somebody's got to do the lab work. Somebody's got to, put the data in the computer and run the models and all that kind of stuff. But when you get into those higher level positions, by the time you've really invested so much of your time and energy in becoming a specialist in a certain area, in working within a certain organization, it really isn't until you start getting up in the higher level positions that some of the claws come out. And this is not to say that it's across the board. I want to clarify that there's a lot of good people in our industry, many industries. Not all whites are racist, not all men are sexist. But all it takes is one or two individuals, and in particular in positions of authority. And I meant to pull out Jackie Abrams' book, Hush Money. She's one of the best. It just came out recently. It's one of the best books I've read on sort of really capturing those behind the scenes conversations that happen, right? Those, you don't belong here or whatever it is. But then being able to use large organizations, being able to use bureaucracy to really deny resources, deny opportunities to speak at conferences, deny opportunities to be in leadership or undermine leadership opportunities that you may have. And to begin recruiting people within the firm or within the organization to help with that. And so all it takes is, just one or two individuals who either has a deep personal prejudice. It could be a belief that, it's okay for women to work for a little while, but eventually they need to go home and get married. They need to start raising kids. That needs to be their priorities. That's how they were raised. That's how they think, it should be. It could be, a negative experience that they've had. Whatever that influence is, that they have that deeply held belief. And that is not unconscious bias. That is not something that, telling your story and people say, oh, I just didn't know that it's, that's just gonna, go away. And then you have those people who are, as you go up the pyramid gets smaller and there's more power plays. And so there are people who will play off of those prejudices to recruit alliances, and get allies to support them, saying, oh, let's knock her out of the way. Let's knock him out of the way. And, and kind of knock out some of the competition. So.
I absolutely agree. I remember having a conversation years ago with a young engineer who was in the office. He was like, Michelle, I don't want to play the game. I was like, there's a game at play, whether you're playing or not. You have to decide what game you want to play. So sitting on the bench, you still on the team, you're on the bench, your name is not going to get called. You're not going to make it on the bus. They're not going to save a seat on the bus, meaning going to, further along your career. I was like, and like you said, even access to training. He was literally denied training, literally was a structural engineer working on a transmission line project, the only one on his team. Director brought in training for transmission line work. He was told he could not attend. Everybody else in his group could. He literally got a job offer because he was a structural engineer that worked on transmission line work. And he like, Michelle, this is home. Like, it's down the street from my house. I can go home, have lunch with my wife and daughter. My wife is pregnant with us. Like he was like, this is the thing for him. They went to counter him to get him to stay with the organization. And he was like, I told him, like, you don't have to counter me because when I asked you for the training, you told me no. And oftentimes locking out people from access to training so they can further their careers, locking them out for promotion and raises or even acknowledgement of the work that they provided, now pushes them out of the organization. And something else you brought around ageism, around baby boomers leaving, the silver tsunami. And so for those of you that are in the industry, whether it's water, infrastructure, civil engineers, you may know we're short 25,000 engineers per year for the next 10 years. And so organizations are still not willing to discuss this. Why? They're going to get the white men to retire and then hire them back as consultants. So now they're saying we're not really short 25,000. We're just short whatever. And so what has happened that has compounded these practices, policies, and procedures in organizations is being short 25,000 civil engineers. How many women over, let's say, from 2000 to today, because they would be in their mid 40s, right? Like me, that you have you run off from the industry 25,000 women? It's a good possibility they have 25,000 women, just gender wise, they've run off from the industry that they need direly just to maintain our current infrastructure, much less build it. And so just think about how racism, gender bias, sexism have all now impacted everybody. Right. Because infrastructure, water is for everybody. So I'm gonna pause there because I get really upset.
And it's really the, you know, it's the three factors that really come up. Are you know, one is family demands, and you know, as men move up in the ranks, they have fewer demands at home. You know, whether it's because of a wife, whether they hire someone, whatever. As women move up in the ranks, that their home demands tend not to go down. Yep. So there's more demands at work. There's still the same amount of demands at home. You know, you know, I've seen some of the studies that have come out about, what are we going to do to keep, you know, retain women? How do we keep, you know, how do we lock the doors and keep them from leaving? And it's like lactation rooms and childcare on site, and that's going to take care of it. That doesn't do it, right? You're only lactating for so many years when you have kids. But, you know, so they've got the family demands. So that often is one of the first places where we call it leaking from the water career pipeline, right? Is in those, you know, early childbearing years. And then you get to the point where there's that next level jump in their career. So a lot of industries, they talk about the broken rung of not getting up to that first promotion. And that's one critical rung in the ladder. But there's also something like becoming an associate or becoming a vice president or becoming, you know, moving into those lower level executive, those junior executive kind of ranks. And, you know, and that's another shift that, you know, we might see. I mean, I was transferred up to an office where essentially all the men had been promoted to associates or had been stolen away by the clients. We were in the middle of a boom. And they had basically a large group of younger women. And so they needed a woman to kind of manage all the women. You know, that's not uncommon. And, you know, it's also true with people of color. You know, you got women are kind of get pushed into more admin and marketing and accounting kind of roles. And remember, women have always been in these organizations, in admin, in accounting, in marketing. And then they get degrees in science, engineering, you know, become operators, whatever. And then they're writing the reports, they're doing the project management, they're, you know, making sure they get paid. They're managing the team. It's still in those similar positions. And, you know, Black and brown, you know, out in the field, Asian in the computer labs. I mean, it's still, you know, you still see those stereotypes. And so often they're not being prepared for leadership. And I really got to see this. We at Black. Sorry.
No, you're good.
Okay,
no,
sorry.
I was just agreeing with you.
Okay, yes, yeah. Often, well, we at Water Citizen Foundation, we started doing, you know, as I got certified in things like, you know, coaching, facilitation, and doing masterminds, which is this sort of this peer mentorship, facilitated peer mentorship process. I started doing them virtually with Women of Water, and it was often women like myself, Generation X, maybe an occasional baby boomer. But usually the younger women, they're still in the young professionals program. They've still got all their friends there. They think, oh, we got plenty of women, we got plenty of people of color, everything's fine. And then suddenly at the beginning of COVID, we started seeing a lot of millennials showing up. And it occurred to me that the older millennials are turning 40. They're getting to that point where they're sort of reviewing their career and saying, well, I put in my dues. I spent all this time sort of as helping out my boss. And now I'm getting pushback. I'm getting delays. I'm not really seeing that I have a future at this company. And to begin thinking about making a move at that point can be kind of scary.
It does. It's what some people have said, you want to move, don't stay at a place longer than 7 years. It's a few things, right? Sometimes for women, it's less times. If you're Black, it's even fewer, less than 7, much less than 7 might be a year or 2. And sometimes, but usually for Black people, it takes longer to find a job. So you're usually in for 6 months and you might be looking for a job for a year before you find one. And so what that indicates is, what happens is, number one, you're finding out real quick, looking ahead of you, how people are getting promoted or not getting promoted, how they are recognizing people for their work, what projects, who's getting assigned to the best projects. I've had this, like why do I just get this retrofit job and everybody else is getting this new water facility that adjoins to this new dam, or and the new dam team is half of the team that's going on to this phase. Like, how does that even happen? And you're looking at it and you're like, I am the only one. I was the only Black woman engineer that was in our transmission distribution projects internally. And I was in the field. And so you really start asking, what, I was the only one left after 7 years. Hell, after like the Great Recession, I was pretty much the only one left of those new incoming engineers in the early 2000s. I was the only one left. And so you see it happen. And I remember before I got into construction, I worked, I was a sales engineer. So it's not just water, it's not just infrastructure. I worked for a manufacturing company in their electrical division. And I remember a Black guy that was there before. He had been there for a few years. We were about the same age. He's like, okay, so the new group of Black people are here. We cycled through that company. Mm-hmm. And we were in and out in less than 2 years. And everybody on my team, whether they were Asian, women, or Black, all cycled in and out of that particular team or organization. Now, I'll say that facility specifically in less than 2 years. And so it's really, really interesting if you watch the cycle. And now it's easier. Back then, LinkedIn had just launched. We didn't know it was a thing. We found out a few years later it was a thing, right at the beginning, at the height of the Great Recession, when people were really looking for jobs. But what happened was, now you can go and look and see all of the women who may have been in the organization for years, but they pretty much from a 1 to 2, and look and see who started the same job title as them around the same time that were men, and see how their job titles change. Right. Sometimes you don't even have to ask. You can go look and go, interesting. And so you can't always determine what's going on, but after a while, as analytical people, we see patterns, and we don't have to necessarily ask questions. So today we do have some access to kind of pick up on these patterns you're talking about, Dr. Kat.
Well, and that's the thing. And I am a systems analyst, that's the way my brain works. That's what I was trained to do. And so, yeah, I see patterns, I see trends. But it'd be nice to be able to back that up with data. And we don't ask these questions, and we're not supposed to ask these questions. The fact that I've been providing an opportunity and asked to speak at the American Waterworks Association Diversity, Equity, Inclusion session, where they're doing the awards and everything, and then they've got a few speakers. That's kind of a big deal. I haven't spoken there for over 10 years, because when I started Water Citizen Media, I was told I had to make a choice. I could be a water professional or a media professional. I couldn't be both. thinking that I started that organization thinking, wouldn't it be nice if there was an actual water professional able to write about water? But, they didn't want that line to be crossed. And, and so I've just been watching, this all the work on this silver tsunami, water workforce crisis, and what are we going to do? While the emphasis is always on the next generation, the next generation, the next generation, right? The younger. And the older people are always supposed to be helping younger, and now the millennials are helping the Gen Zs. You bring up the recession, the millennials kind of tend to complain about that it was a time of, I graduated and it was hard to find a job. But for Generation X, we were in those first rung, lower level management positions. So it was really easy for people not, to be kind of gotten rid of those positions. And then when the new money came back in, and Obama's ARRA came in and money was available, they wanted to hire younger. It said, well, they got to be tech savvy. Not like we can't learn technology, and so they brought in a whole new generation of young, cute, and cheap. And now the millennials are starting to get into, they're aging out of the young professional programs. They're starting to see that they too have often not been prepared for these higher level positions. And so, if you start adding up these delays that come up, right, this feeds in with the ageism aspect of it. That, for some people, it's sort of the impression that ageism is just something that old white men make up to prevent their jobs from being taken from all these, younger women, people of color. It's our time. We're going to take over, and men just are claiming ageism. But actually, from what I've seen, women and people of color are actually impacted more by ageism. So the way that works is, basically, we're starting with our cohort. And, it might take us a little longer to get through school. We might have more family demands, or, gets pregnant while she's still in school, leaves school, can't get back in to finish her degree, or it takes longer while she's working. Somebody who's, lower income perhaps has to work more. So it might take them a little longer to get through those first few years. Then you get into, that first job. And if you're immediately pushed into, as I was pushed into more, you must be good at writing. Why don't you write the reports? Why don't you work on the proposals? Rather than really developing those technical skills that lets you move up in that guild structure, right?
Yep.
And if it takes us longer to get that first promotion, and especially when you run into individuals who have certain beliefs about women or people of color, exactly. When that happens, if it's not, you're not quite sure it's a thing right away, the delays start building up, and then you have to figure out how to start over someplace else. You might make a lateral move. You might actually take a step back. Yep. Eventually your age cohort kind of, you start to split. Right. And then before long, you're competing against people who are younger than you, or even working for people who are younger than you. And then those assumptions start coming in. It's younger folks who say, you got, on the one hand, you've got the older folks saying, hey, you're supposed to be committed to your job. It's supposed to be a linear, career path. And, if you didn't hit certain things by a certain time, there must be something wrong with you. Or if you took time off for family reasons, well, you're certainly not committed. Why are you coming back? Why do you have a gap in your resume? And then you've got, with the younger folks, they don't want to hire someone older than them. They make, you're making people uncomfortable. They feel threatened or something like that about the idea of hiring someone who may be younger or maybe older than, the young professionals. So.
Absolutely. I can definitely see that. I just keep thinking about people in my network, and I know a friend of mine, she left a government agency, and there was a Black man that had been with the agency for 30 years. He never made manager, never made a manager role. And she brought it up in an open meeting. She also talked about how the two women that did get promoted, she was like, Michelle, the amount of work they had to do to get a promotion was ridiculous. And so when she went in to get her annual raise, it's like, oh, well, this is all we can give you. And so she resigned a few months later. And she happened to be in a vehicle with her boss, and her boss would go, if you want a raise, I can give you this. She said, when I asked you for one a few months ago, you didn't have the money, so don't worry about it. You can keep it. So it's really the gameplay that goes on, like you say, that keep people stagnant, because that man may have gone to leave at certain points in his career, and people are like, well, you never progress, you don't have this, why don't you? And it's like trainings and certifications that you need in order to leave that you don't have, and you may not be able to afford to get, and usually your employers pay for them. Now, and they set it up so they know you can't go anywhere. They know you can't, you're not eligible for promotion, so they don't have to pay you as much. So you're either kind of regulated to being there, starting your own business, or leaving the industry. And it is, and oftentimes younger people don't see this. They think we're bitter because we don't know how to advance our careers, and we're like, I'm just take. To start taking notice of that. And so we're having these
we're all queen bees, right?
Yes.
We're just trying to keep them down. And it's that just divides us even more.
Right? It does. And there are some that absolutely listen and do, because they see it and they've had it happen to women in their family or their fathers. Just thinking about Black women talking about their fathers who were in tech or were engineers who end up having to leave a region and leave their family behind in order to get a promotion. Imagine being hours or a state or two away because where you live, the racism is so bad you can't get a promotion. And these are things that are real, that are still happening. And so what are solutions? And that's about this for a while.
So yes, and it is really important to say, yes, it is still happening. We've been trying to, raise awareness of what's going on. Just recently at Metropolitan Water District in Southern California, it's the largest water district in the country, and and they had a situation where a number of women operators were getting harassed. They were getting actual sexual assault in cases, and when they complained, they were retaliated against. And so they went to the LA Times, and it resulted in the general manager decided it was time to retire, brought in a new gentleman who's been very active in the Utilities of the Future movement. And he's brought in someone who does, is a chief diversity, equity, and inclusion officer. Well, this didn't happen right away. Initially, they kind of tried to pin it on a field manager, but the state actually did an audit and found that that there was systemic racism and there was systemic sexism. And one of the things that I don't think people see, that I happen to live in that area around this time, is that there was an operator program that had just set up at had been around for 40 years, kind of bouncing from school to school. And they just set up at a school kind of inland San Diego County. And they're like, well, how are we going to get people to come out here to the desert? And say, oh, let's start recruiting women. Well, next thing they knew, they had all these women that were coming through their program, and they're churning them out into a workforce that isn't prepared to deal with them, or to integrate them into the culture. And so I think that's really part of it, is when we keep focusing on the front of the pipeline and not changing culture. So we talk about solutions. We are actually working right now. We're talking with some of the utility heads about, there's a few things that we're doing. One is the League of Extraordinary Women of Water. It's a mastermind program, year-long program, for women who really are committed to um, really elevating their careers. And that's kind of more on an individual level, but bringing them together into this virtual community and having that mastermind process once a month to be able to really present and get brainstorming support around challenges that may be facing you at work, and supporting each other in reaching their goals. We're also working with women and underrepresented founder startups in the water workspace. There's been a lot of work in water tech innovation clusters, this whole ecosystem of support around new startups in the water space. And there really have not been, these organizations really have not done a very good job when it comes to diversity. It's already very hard to get funding for women and people of color as for startups, but certainly in this arena. But the thing that I really think is going to be a game changer is for us to work with utilities and other, the consulting firms and the agencies on developing a returnship program for the water sector. And I wanted to point out earlier that, we talk about, well, just if something's not working at one place, you can pick up and leave. It's not true in water utilities, right? These are legal monopolies. When you're working in water, they're legal monopolies. If you're with a consultant firm that is working with those utilities, water is local. And so you get to know a certain water basin, you get to know certain water systems. And so it is a little harder to kind of just pick up and move if you're not being, seeing opportunities at a particular location. So as people are finding, reaching these points, either they leave because of family reason, childcare, elder care, sick care in the family, they become sick, or something that happens in the workplace, a layoff, toxic workplace, dead end career, decide to try entrepreneurship, whatever it is. If there is a gap in their resume, other industries have done what's called a returnship. So basically it's like an internship, right? So probably around a 12-week program. There's not a commitment on either end, but you have that opportunity with a cohort of other people who are coming in at the same time and with mentorship and an opportunity to see where you might need to catch up, learning a new project management system, or changes in practices, or updating your your licenses and registrations or certifications, whatever it is you need to do in order to come back into an organization and show what you can do. So similar to an internship, although it's for people who already have the degrees, they already have prior experience. So you're not dealing with people who don't know how to show up at work on time, or how to, behave professionally in a meeting and all that. And the hire rate has been tremendous. So often, if someone has a gap, they know that certainly in the public sector, it's very, very much frowned upon to have a gap in your resume. So even if you can get through USA Jobs or that first rung in the hiring process, then you've got to get through the hiring managers. And if they don't want to hire someone older, if they don't want to hire someone with a gap in the resume, you're kind of dead in the water. But to have this returnship program as an opportunity, we've been talking with folks from a number of utilities. How would we handle the civil service hiring process? How would we handle the unions? And how do we make sure that those issues are addressed? But it's not without precedence. We have all sorts of fellowships, AAAS fellowships, ORISE fellowships, other programs that are out there that bring people in. But usually it's while you're in school, or just a few years out, or under 35 or whatever. So this provides more opportunities to get that on-ramp, to get back into the workforce.
Thank you for that, Dr. Kat. I want to ask a couple questions about returnship programs. Why do you think aren't there more returnship programs? I've only really seen it
Yeah.
two places, two organizations that are focused on returnship programs. One is Longstanding Women's Org that we're both familiar with. And one is relatively new tech startup, and it's mostly tech jobs but they're on the technical side. So this is specifically people looking for organizations looking for engineering talent. What have you seen been barriers to creating returnship programs, or getting, maybe they have been and they haven't been successful and been in organizations long? What do you think? What have you seen as some barriers that companies need to deal with and address in order to have this work long term for them?
Absolutely. And I think some of those others are a little more other kind of like placement companies. And a returnship is an actual program. And we did an entire summit, and this is something I can share with your audiences. watercitizen.org/women. We can get the link to our 45 extraordinary conversations and a summit on Women of Water Get Real, where and why women are leaking from the water career pipeline. So we went all the way through from kids in colleges to first hires to, retention and development to executive leadership. And then the last day we looked at entrepreneurship and returnships. And so I talked to the head of iRelaunch. Carol is, really one of the pioneers in this space. It started really in the financial sector. Before the crash, when the financial sector was doing really well, and they needed, women to follow up on all the sales and whatnot. It's like, what are we going to do? Oh, let's bring back some of the women who, left to have kids, right? And it used to be that more of these were, and in some cases, they still are restricted to women or to people who have been in a caretaking role and have taken time off work. Others, also allow men and other reasons. But in any case, you've got the financial sector first, and then you had the tech companies. They want computer programmers. Again, these are kind of more transferable jobs that you might be able to step out and come back in, and a lot hasn't changed. Accounting, marketing, computer programming, some of these things that you can kind of pick up where you left off. What's the other area? Manufacturing. Some of these large corporations, and so there's iRelaunch, there's Path Forward, there's Untapped Potential. And so we talked with 3 of them at our summit. We also talked with the Society of Women Engineers, which has a task force for STEM career reentry. Now, again, when you're dealing with the corporate sector, you can make a business case for bringing people in, right? When you're dealing with more public sector dominated industry like water and the environment, you're running into a lot of, it's a different hiring process. So whether you're with an agency or utility, whether you're with a government contracting, you have these, the difference in the hiring process. It's not insurmountable, but if you're an organization that, gets its revenue from helping people set up returnship programs, are you going to go with the easier one or the harder one? So as far as I know, I've only known of one environmental consulting firm that works with folks in the water industry that has had a returnship program. We actually had them. This was CDM Smith. We actually had them on our summit, and they've been doing it for a few years. First year, they only had 2 people, and it was both women that had previously worked there. Now, they've made some changes over the years, but now they're up to 6 people. Okay, 6 people for the whole company, 6 returnships. They got 600 applications. One of the biggest areas of pushback I get when I say, hey, we talk about this water workforce crisis. Are you looking into returnships? It's like, oh, well, where would we find these people who've left the industry? It's like, well, where have we heard that before? Well, we can't find any Black engineers. Well, we can't find any Hispanic scientists. It's like, especially when you're online, when you have social media, when there's all of these groups out there. I mean, for this program, what I post to like 50 different groups, right? That you can go to the right places and say, if you're someone who's interested in this, or someone who is, please pass this on, and you're able to reach people pretty quickly. So, yeah. So I'm very optimistic that we're going to be able to pull this together. I want to do it with a number of utilities, so there's a bit of safety in numbers, and just be able to show that it works in a lot of different parts of the country, big organizations, smaller organizations, that we can provide that mentorship, that cohort basis virtually, while placing people in different utilities for different positions, and working with those utilities on making sure that that their needs are met.
I love that. I think I agree with you. Where can they find the people for the returnship program? Go in HR and look at all the women that were laid off, pipped out, quit, and they never said, like, they just never came back. Those
Right.
maybe the last ones, but literally they're over in your HR department. And sometimes you might need to clean house and make some changes internally in order to get your returnship program. What have you found as far as culture-wise organizations being willing to do or have done to change the culture? And I would love to. So now we got to have a conversation about CDM Smith, how they had 600 people apply for a returnship program. And were these an engineering role?
As I recall, they were mostly engineering scientists, project management in those areas. And so, and if I'm not mistaken, they typically did, at the end of the 12 weeks, they had the option of offering someone a full-time position, and that they said that they had, and then a lot of the women said, well, I'm not quite ready to go back to work yet. And that actually kind of gets me wondering of whether the organization has done enough to make it possible for someone to go back to work with kids at home. Right. And we're seeing a lot of that. I mean, it certainly came up at COVID. There were a lot of changes during COVID. I think some of those changes are scaling back in some places. You also have these as the millennials are having their kids, and as they're deciding, it's just not worth it, they're very entrepreneurial. They're going to say, yes, I want to go, start my own business. They may find that that's not so easy. I mean, when you're working in a very public sector dominated space with a lot of government contracting, it is really not as easy to just start a business at home. If you've got to get into government contracting, chances are you're going to have to sub to a larger organization. You've got to get your woman-owned small business or minority-owned business, certifications. You've got to get, and that's just a hunting license. That just gets you in the door. You've still got to be able to get on people's lists. It's a process that can be very hard for people in this space. It's not as easy as they might think of. Oh, I'm just going to hang my shingle and everyone's going to beat a path to my door. And then if you've got that time that you've been an entrepreneur, that's frowned upon as well by these larger organizations. It may be harder to get back in. That's also a space where we might want to look at having people join our returnship program, because when you're young and you're healthy and you don't care about health insurance and things like that, that's one thing. But as you get older, health insurance might be a better deal. You might want to have that available, have a regular salary. So it's really interesting to me how hesitant people are to hire older professionals when there's a lot of younger professionals who, they say, well, I've actually had someone tell me this, that they finally got all their certifications and licenses and everything and got themselves qualified. And the baby boomers in many cases are not leaving. They're not
Yep.
taking their retirement at 65. They might be, staying until they're 70, 75, and then saying, well, telling her, well, you're only going to be here another 10 years. So we're going to go start grooming someone younger than you.
Yep. Absolutely.
I've talked to, people who, older men who have retired, who put in had fantastic careers, large organizations, and then they get recruited back to become general managers of water utilities that won't promote from within. And they're trying to develop, women and people of color that are already in the organizations. And the boards, this is another key thing with utilities, is the boards are a major part of the decision-making of these senior level positions. And nobody's really looking at what the boards are doing. And are the boards really supporting selection of women and people of color? Or if they do, is it sort of the glass cliff situation? If it's an emergency, if there's a crisis, put someone out there, and then as soon as that crisis is averted, you push them over the cliff, right?
Exactly. Or they are trying to push an initiative through a Black and brown community that splits the community or tears down or dismantles the community. It goes away. It displaces them. It outprices them using intimate, the word, domain.
Eminent domain. Right. Yeah.
And so once they get them as the face to push this initiative through, it's like, okay, you're good enough for that, and now we don't need you anymore, and you're gone. You're absolutely right. Or we often see they come in and fix it, like, okay, the recession's over or the pandemic's over, we're back to normal. Your high level of performance and the stress that you've gone through really doesn't matter anymore. We don't need you. Come up with a reason, and now it's a cakewalk for the white man that comes through. Yes, absolutely. We see that repeatedly, and even if they do well,
and not even just on the money side of that, the power side, but you talk about some of the Black and brown communities. You look at what happened in Jackson, Mississippi.
Yep.
You look at what happened in Baltimore. You look at what happened in Flint. You look at, you get a lot of, especially in the South, you get a lot of the Black communities in the cities not getting infrastructure updates and things like that, and the boards are people who come from the white suburbs.
Yep.
And so you might have a Black general manager, but they're answering to a board who's really got their hands tied.
Absolutely. So it's way more visual. So Dr. Kat, where can people, we could talk about this for hours. Yes. So I do want to let everybody know, where can they find you next? Where are you speaking? Where can they connect with you on social?
Yeah. Well, I certainly would love to hear from anyone who is interested in joining. We have the registration open right now for the League of Extraordinary Women of Water founding member cohort. And, I think this is really going to elevate the women in the profession as a whole. So definitely get in touch with me for that. I can, let's see, what did I do with the link for that? I'll put my Calendly link down here.
Okay. Yep. Cool.
Yeah. And we can follow up with that. Yeah, we'll put it down below. I am going to be speaking at the American Water Works Association. This year we're going to be in Toronto. It is June 11th to 14th. And I'm presenting at the Diversity, Equity, Inclusion session on the morning of Wednesday, June 14th. And then the following morning, if you're still in town, please stick around, or if you can move your flight, whatever, please stick around. First thing in the morning, we're going to be at Toronto Metropolitan University having a Women of Water mastermind. So you have a chance to experience what that's like. It is a 4-hour process. We're going to make sure that everyone has a chance to really work on their goals, to really work on, to have that experience of having the support of amazing extraordinary women of water as their peer through this peer mentoring process. It's not a networking event. It's not, oh my goodness, we keep calling these DEI sessions networking events. Okay, it's just a networking event. It's like, no, we need to get data. We need to have real studies. We need to have real programs. This is what we're going to be talking about at American Water Works Association. If we want to get serious about the water workforce crisis, about the infrastructure workforce crisis, about the engineering workforce crisis, we need to get serious about DEI. It is not a nicety, it is a necessity for solving the water workforce crisis and for everything that goes with that: infrastructure, climate, environmental justice, all the crises that we are trying to deal with. All of it's underlain by workforce, having the people who are trained, qualified to do the work. And when we get those people, we've got to keep them in the workforce. And if they need to leave, we've got to provide them a way to get back in.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Dr. Kat, this has been fantastic. Thank you so much. There are solutions if you're in the water industry, utilities, and you have a shortage of talent. Do not let sexism, racism, and ageism stop you from getting the talent that you are obligated to provide to residents in your area. You literally are hurting your ratepayers, you're hurting citizens, and you're hurting the public because you will not provide them the talent that is needed to do this work. And so, Dr. Kat, everybody, just connect with Dr. Kat on LinkedIn, DM her, message her when you connect with her. And that's at linkedin.com /n/Kat, CATSHRIER. So definitely connect with her. We'll also add these to comments and show notes. So everybody, thank you so much for joining us. We will be back next week to talk about DEI in the engineering, the state of DEI in the engineering and construction industry. Until then, be well, and I look forward to having you join us next time.